Hey everybody, I'm Bede, aka The Terrible Australian of Super Podcast, and welcome to the 10th edition of the Godzilla Diaries. For this one, I'm going to be talking about Godzilla 1985, and as well as Godzilla vs. Biollante. So let's get right into it. First up, Godzilla 1985, which is the recut, reshot, Americanized version of the Return of Godzilla, which I talked about previously in the last video. And they kind of sort of go for the same approach for this one as they did with the very first film back in 1954. So they sort of take out a lot of footage of original footage and add a bunch of whole new scenes that sort of show all the events that happened in the film from the perspective of the American characters. And also this one, which is pretty cool, is that they bring back the character of the reporter character of Steve Martin, who was played by Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr comes back to reprise the role in this version of the film, so which is pretty cool because you get to see what happened in the character from the very first Godzilla film, the American version of the first Godzilla film to the American version of this film. But at the same time, what I think, so there's a lot of sort of scenes between him and sort of with the U.S. military, because in a way they sort of call him in because he's sort of all of a sudden become like the major expert on Godzilla. So they call him in, and sort of whenever there's certain scenes that happen in the original footage from the Japanese version, it sort of cuts back and forth between the Japanese shot stuff and as well as the American shot stuff, because there's sort of a lot of American references and all that in the original version, and they sort of show how those sort of moments are seen from the American's perspective. It sounds a bit jumbled, but you can forgive me for that, for just trying to describe the whole thing. But what's interesting though is, unlike what they did with the very first film, how they don't have the character of Steve Martin interacting with the characters from the Japanese version. So he's totally separate from the Japanese characters in the original version, which I think works much better in a way, because it just seems, because I mentioned in the first review when I talked about Godzilla King of the Monsters, I felt that was kind of sort of very awkwardly done, sort of having the Steve Martin character interacting with the Japanese characters. So which is good that this film didn't do that. But at the same time, all I kept thinking was, I have to admit, I feel like Raymond Burr was very underused in this film. Like, he's not in the movie much, and you can kind of get the feeling that he's just basically just there for the paycheck, because he just looks incredibly bored throughout all of his scenes, and to be honest, the whole sort of all the American shot stuff just feels very padded and doesn't really add anything to the film. And it doesn't help that, even though Raymond Burr looks bored, but at least he's trying compared to all the other American actors that he has to share his scenes with. They're all terrible. And also and for some bizarre reason, there's a lot of product placement in their sections, because they keep showing like a characters drinking Dr. Pepper, and there's a big huge like Dr. Pepper drink machine in a hallway, so they show that a bit, which is pretty off-putting. And also for this one though, in King of the Monsters, what they did when it came to the Japanese segments of the film, they sort of went back and forth between having the characters speak in their original accents, and then whenever they sort of interacted with the Steve Martin character, they would sort of dub them over in English. And in this version, they dub all the Japanese actors in the film are dubbed over in English. And I have to admit, like, for some bizarre reason, like the translation of the dialogue change and all that from this film to what they did in the original, it just seemed like they the American version sort of dumbs things down a lot in this one in terms of how they approach the dialogue of the Japanese characters, because instead of, and also they sort of really tone down a lot of the sort of the themes and the sort of the character development from the original Japanese version. They sort of really sort of either cut that all out, because a lot of the character development between the characters in the original version is basically cut out, and it just makes, and it kind of ruins the movie a bit. Like, it is still a watchable film, but at the same time, it just seeing this recut version really changes a lot, and it changes the tone and feel of the film. And what's interesting though is they sort of there's a scene where in the original in Return of Godzilla, there's sort of a scene where this is, I sort of talked about, there was a quick scene where both Russia and America sort of ganging up on Japan, sort of saying, "Oh, you need to use nuclear weapons to go against Godzilla," and the Japanese Prime Minister pretty much says, "No, we're not going to do that." And so it sort of went to a shot not long after that scene where it showed like a secretive Russian ship, military ship, and it had one of these characters sort of turning off the keyboards that work to turning on the nuclear weapons. But during when Godzilla attacks, their systems malfunction, and one of the Russian characters goes back and tries to turn off the machine before the missiles get launched. But he arrives there too late and he gets killed, and they get sent off anyway. But what's interesting in the American version is that they insert a cut just after when the guy is just before the guy's about to die, where it shows him actually pressing the button, and it's implying that he fired the missiles, and that it wasn't an accident, that he actually went and fired them. And which I found really kind of weird, because it should have sort of show, as I know sort of American and Russian, the Cold War was very rampant around the time that this film was released. So I guess that's probably why they did it, and it sort of made the Russian characters, made them out to be even more bad guys when they actually tried to stop the nuclear weapons in the Japanese version. But what's interesting though in this version is that anytime the Russian characters are on screen, they have no subtitles for them at all. Like, you have no idea what they're saying. Like, I don't know whether that was just in my version of the film, or there were actual subtitles in other versions for the Russian scenes, but it kind of seems like the American version, like the American filmmakers behind this Americanized version did that deliberately. I just found that just very weird and a bit wrong to me. But overall, if I had to give this recut version of the film a rating, I'd probably give it about maybe about a 2.5. Let's get right onto the sequel to the Return of Godzilla is Godzilla vs. Biollante. And what's interesting, Godzilla vs. Biollante, I have to admit, I do like this film. I did really enjoy it, but at the same time, if I had to describe this plot, and I'm not going to attempt to, but if you actually read on paper, the plot to this film is really strange. Like, it's a really strange premise for a Godzilla film. And I mean, okay, I'll admit, a lot of the Godzilla films in the past had very strange premises, but this one in particular was especially strange. And what I really did like about this one is that this has to be the most plot-heavy Godzilla film I've seen so far. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this film, like a lot of sort of characters and subplots. There's a lot of there's sort of this Frankenstein monster-esque kind of subplot, because one of the there's a doctor who sort of who's working on this. Well, I should try to explain the plot. So, but I'll have to. But yeah, there's a sort of a lot of aspects to it, like a scientist character who somehow gets Godzilla's cells and has to and tries to with the Japanese government try to find a way to stop Godzilla. So in this one, they sort of think since they can use this bacteria, sort of mix it with the Godzilla's cells, and that way maybe the bacteria might kill Godzilla. But this scientist character by the name of I gotta find Dr. Shirogami. Not only that, because he sort of has this sort of Frankenstein-esque kind of quality to him, because his daughter was killed at the beginning because again there's more subplots to this film which I'll get into, and so somehow he gets his daughter's cells. This is what I gathered from the film, so I'm probably getting this wrong. Gets his daughter's cells, mixes them with flowers, and then is somehow keeping her alive. And then he sort of combines Godzilla's cells with the flower and his daughter's cells, and he creates this brand new monster by the name of Biollante, who's sort of this giant flower kind of monster, and which is actually kind of like the design for this Biollante is pretty awesome. Like it's a pretty cool looking creature, and it kind of reminded me of something out of like John Carpenter's The Thing, and but that's just one of the many plots in this film. There's also a plot where a young girl by the name of Mika, who has ESP and somehow can communicate with Godzilla and as well as Biollante and plants, and also there's another subplot where an army lieutenant and another guy sort of team up and sort of try to figure out what to do to stop Godzilla. And there's this like this American business that wants to steal the Godzilla cells for themselves, but then there's another business from where are they from? From the Middle East, who want to steal the Godzilla cells for themselves. So they send a hitman, try to claim them, and like this movie has so much plot. Like I have to give the movie credit for having going further with not having just a simple plot, rather something that's a bit more story driven. But I do think it might be a little too much, because so much does happen in this film, but at the same time I did find it really compelling nonetheless, even though like just explaining the plot to you just now, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But overall it's pretty good. I do think it's a pretty solid film. I do think the Japanese actors in the film are solid, but I do think their performances suffer a bit when they actually have to talk in English, because you know for a fact that some of them don't really speak English that much, and it really affects their performance. And also the sort of actual English speaking actors, their performances are really bad. So, but like the ending is just totally bizarre, and also the sort of Godzilla stuff, Godzilla versus against Biollante stuff was pretty cool, and it's also pretty cool just to see like how sort of they since this was made in the late 80s, they had sort of the big budget to sort of go all out for this series compared to say the 60s and 70s films. So that was pretty cool, and overall I think Godzilla vs. Biollante, it's a pretty really good, really entertaining, really engaging entry in the series, even if it has probably the strangest plot in the history of all the Godzilla films. So overall, if I have to give this one a rating, I'd probably give it about a 4 out of 5. I really liked it, even though it's totally bizarre. So yep, that's the end of this 10th edition of the Godzilla Diaries. I hope you all enjoyed it. Keep a lookout very soon for my 11th edition, in which I'll be talking about Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, and Godzilla versus Mothra Battle for Earth. So keep a lookout for that one, and I'll see you guys later. See everyone. Bye.